what we're going to be looking at today is a couple of different things. So we're going to go over what the BIM process is. So from looking at this, we got a handful of people who already know that in and out. But we are going to talk a little bit about how we can actually use it for design, some of the different things that we can do with it, and hopefully a fun demonstration of going through the different software tools and going over some of the different workflow aspects to not just work in one tool and get the most out of that, but to take advantage of the multiple tools that you have available and make sure that we're not doing rework along the way. Now, here's that retread for some of you. So for BIM, biggest thing with BIM is that it's a workflow. It's not any one program or tool. The idea for BIM, either building information modeling or building information management, depending on who you're talking to and how we're using it, is that we're taking insight out of what we're building. We're not just making something that's 3D. We want to make something that is intelligent, not just that the objects have intelligence, but our work is actually intelligent. We're collaborating with others and getting the benefit of their insight and of their expertise, and we're being more productive. And as part of that, most everybody has probably seen this image before, where we're actually going through the workflow. You know, we're using BIM in design, we're moving through documentation and construction and operations, and we're trying to get the benefits throughout all the different phases. And some of the big problems that we tend to run into is that if we're not doing BIM, or even if we are doing BIM, but we're not in a full-on workflow, we're still compartmentalized. We're doing BIM and planning. But then when we move to design, we're starting over again in a different tool. And then when we get to construction, okay, now we got to redo it again. So like anything else, we're taking advantage of the BIM workflow, but we want to make sure that we're not getting stuck in that sawtooth platform still. Now, this is not meant to be exhaustive by any means in terms of tools that are available, but this is just a handful of the different tools that are available in the different phases for a project lifecycle. Now, what we're going to be focusing on more so is early on design. So looking at some of the different tools that we can take advantage of, and in case of this demo, what we're going to be looking at most specifically is FormIt, Insight, Revit, and Dynamo, with a little bit of Navisworks at the end. So we're going to go through a workflow of how we actually would take advantage of all these different tools intelligently through a little bit of a project life cycle with some interesting examples, hopefully, for everyone to take a look at. Cool. So now, how do we actually start this workflow? What are we looking to do? Well, as with anything, it's always going to typically start with an idea. So, you know, I want to do this kind of a building, or I'd love to use this kind of material, or I'm trying to do this with my work. And then from there, we're going to look to set goals. You know, like with anything else, especially with BIM, it's always good to have an idea of what your end deliverables are going to be. In a lot of cases, you're not going to know that, but when you do, put them in there and say, okay, well, we're going to be doing clash detection, so we're going to work towards that. We're going to be doing not just static rendering, but walkthroughs as well. You know, quantification. If you can identify as many of the goals that you have, not the client, but goals for you as a company, what do you want to get out of this? I typically tell people, this is what you need to do, this is what you want to do, this is what you'd like to do. So you break things down into those different groups, and then you can focus on getting there. Once you've got that out of the way, well, then we just start working. And for a lot of us, we still feel very comfortable going through the process and drawing things out by hand. Nothing wrong with that. There's a bunch of different tools out there, whether it's really just drawing by hand on the sketchpad and then scanning that in, or starting from scratch, or taking advantage of some of the digital sketch tools like Sketchbook or Graphic or Photoshop. However you start, though, from there we might move into FormIt. So why would we look to FormIt? Well, number one, it's easy to use. A lot of companies like to use SketchUp, partially because of how easy it is. FormIt's the same way. It's a very similar environment in terms of modeling. One of the main benefits, though, is that it has access to the content of both SketchUp and Revit for the designers who work in it. So you're not just taking advantage of the data that's already out there, or you're not saying, well, I can't go there because everything I have is already built here. You can bring that in. If there's an element on the SketchUp warehouse, there's no reason not to utilize that and bring it into FormIt. And one of the great benefits of that is that FormIt can actually convert that into a Revit element. So I can then bring that into my Revit project and actually track it and schedule it correctly. Now, a couple of other benefits here is the collaboration. I can actually take advantage of FormIt because it's a cloud-based tool and save my work to the cloud and access it from anywhere, whether it's from my desktop, my computer at home, my iPad, or my Android tablet. Not a problem. I can access the same model and continue to edit that. Now, for a lot of our clients who work in environments that are a little bit more locked down, there's a lot of security, whether it's government or just the kind of project, you actually can use FormIt Pro on your desktop. And you can open and save your files to and from the desktop as well. So if that is a concern, you can still use that. And when I say collaborative workflow, I'm not just talking about the way that you can go from SketchUp or Revit or FormIt into Revit. I'm also talking about how we can have multiple people all working on the same file together. And I'm going to show that in a little bit. Now, from there, I might look at something like Dynamo. Now, Dynamo, more than likely, I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. Hopefully, you've actually seen it. And I'm hoping some of the people that feel they're already on all the way there, they've actually gotten tried their hand at it a little bit. What Dynamo is it's a scripting platform. But the benefit of this is that it's a graphic scripting platform. I usually tell people, if you've ever looked at Revit and said, man, I really wish it could do this, Dynamo is a process to do that. And because it's a graphic scripting, you don't have to learn how to code. Now, if you already know how to program, perfect. You can take this even farther. But if that's not a skill that you currently have, nor is it one that you really want to get into, you can take advantage of Dynamo and say, okay, well, what I want to do is take this element and make it talk to this element. Or I want to export this out and put it into an Excel spreadsheet. Those are some basic use cases. Now, most people, when they think of Dynamo or they see a demonstration, that demonstration is really cool. It's got lots of colors. It's making awesome shapes. The only problem with that is most people tend to think that that's all you can get out of Dynamo. But you can use it for just about anything. We've used it internally on some of our projects to make sure that all the information is embedded in our elements correctly. So prior to printing, for example, we'd make sure that all the doors are numbered and facing the correct way based off of the information on the room. Same thing for mechanical information. We can use this for project management, for document management, not just 3D geometry. Then moving on, we might look at Insight. Now, Insight is literally insight. You're getting insight into your design, and we're talking about this from an environmental standpoint. Now, a lot of people, again, I'm expecting the All the Way There crew, they've probably taken advantage of a tool called Green Building Studios. What that is it's an Autodesk cloud tool for energy analysis, and it's a good one. The problem is it's not always the most easy to understand what you're doing. So if I make a change here, how do I know what that impact is? Insight makes this a lot easier for anybody to take advantage of. I can go in, I can make tweaks, and very quickly see what kind of an impact would this design iteration or design idea have on my process. It's a tool that's available both from Revit and FormIt. It actually has some documentation automation built into it now. So if your firm is actually one of the firms working on the AA 2030 challenge, you can actually use this to automate the process of some of the documentation based on your energy analysis results. And then from there, Navisworks. Now, a lot of people, when they hear Navisworks, their first thought is, well, you know, I'm not really doing clash detection. That's not in my scope. But it's a tool that everybody has access to if you have Revit. So if you're essentially providing, sorry, if you essentially own Building Design Suite Premium, which gets you Revit, you also have Navisworks Simulate. The only difference between Simulate and Manage is that you don't have clash, but you still have the ability to do timeline animations. So if I want to show the process of my building being put together so I can explain how I'm going to be impacting the site to a client, I can show the town board how to expect routing of traffic, or whether it's pedestrian or vehicular. I can show those kind of impacts to people very quickly. And I can also do flexible takeoffs, and that's one of the things I'm actually going to show you. What I mean by that is that, yes, Revit can actually schedule information, but it's hard to say I want to schedule things that don't physically exist in the model. And that's where Navisworks comes in. I can get a takeoff of elements that are not modeled, but do exist as based on elements that are modeled. And don't worry, I'll explain that a little bit more when I'm actually showing it. Okay. And then from there, we can look at Revit. So this is sort of our hub. This is our main component within our BIM design process. And part of the reason for that is our integrity. What we want to do is we want to maintain the integrity of our data, of our information. So that way we're not getting into that sawtooth. So when I look at this, I can take advantage of Revit in the cloud, meaning I can put my model online and use something like Collaboration for Revit to actually coordinate the exact same file with other people from all over the country or even the world. I can use the power of the cloud to run different analyses. I can take that same model and send it out for presentation tools. Whether it's, it's doing a static rendering with something like A360 rendering, where I'm not using my laptop, I'm using the cloud to do it, or I'm taking that same model and sending it to something for VR, like the Vive or the Oculus. And from there, again, analysis, whether it's energy, structural, I'm taking that same model and sending it out. I'm doing my detailing based off of that, and I can even start doing my fabrication as well. Again, Autodesk has been focusing a lot on fabrication the last 2 years, so that way we're not splitting things up quite as much as they had been in the past. The goal is, again, to have that single source of truth, to make sure that everything is consistent throughout the whole process.